Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Black Landscapes Matter. We took a break for the summer, but we're back in the fall leading up to our upcoming elections. Black Landscapes Matter is brought to you by the Black Environmental Leaders. Black Environmental Leaders Association purpose is to create a safe space to uplift all environmental justice causes that affect not only BIPOC communities, but all of our communities across Ohio and beyond. Their goal is to educate, innovate, and activate folks from around the state to get them involved and engaged, continue to uplift environmental education within our communities. And like I said, create this safe space for us to learn about the issues that affect our community, as well as to advocate. And so tonight, we'll be focusing on Cincinnati ballot initiatives. There's a lot of things on the ballot this November, but down here in Southwest Ohio, we have two major hot topics on our ballot this year, and that is the sale of our railroad and also a housing initiative. We have a great panelist here tonight who will introduce themselves shortly. But these are the hot topics. We know that all of you all have been confused on what's going on. And so tonight's purpose is not to be a debate, but let the voters and constituents know what are the facts on the railroad, as well as housing, what are the pros and cons, and how we're looking at both sides of these issues so that all of our constituents and viewers can make an informed decision coming up in November. And so we'll start with Pastor Nelson Pierce. If you can introduce yourself and give us a brief overview of the housing initiative.
Yes. Thank you so much, Celeste. My name is Nelson Pierce. I'm the pastor of Beloved Community Church, and I am here presenting on behalf of Cincinnati Action for Housing Now. And we are working together on the affordable housing ballot initiative. And just to give you an overview, I'm going to share my screen so you can see a little bit of the information. We have, there are a number of coalition partners who have supported this, and we're thankful for all of our partners who have endorsed and supported this campaign. Our purpose is the creation and preservation of truly affordable housing and pathways to home ownership for safe and vibrant communities. One of the things that I'm aware as a career organizer is that many of the problems that we experience in the city are related to people's stability. And that when we make it possible for people to live stable lives, then it solves many of the societal problems. And so affordable housing, in addition to having its own good, also has a strong ripple effect for the creation of vibrant communities. Issue 24 on our ballot this November will give us a chance to say yes to truly affordable housing by restoring our earned income tax to its 2020 levels and using the revenue to create affordable housing at the levels that have been most underserved. And I want to talk just a little bit about the funding source for this. The earnings tax was in 2020 was cut by 0.3%. And so our current earnings tax is 1.8%, as you see there on the bottom of the screen. What you might also notice is that we have by far the lowest earnings tax of any city, of any major city in the state of Ohio and in the region. If we win in November and the earnings tax is restored to 2.1%, we will still have the lowest earnings tax rate of any state, of any city in the state of Ohio, and of any city in the region. And so what we are asking is not, we don't believe what we are asking is heavy or onerous. We don't believe this will put Cincinnati at a competitive disadvantage, but still keeping us a leader in terms of the tax rate. We can set aside money to make sure that housing is affordable for the people who need it most. And then for the median household income in Cincinnati, the income tax increase or restoration would be about $2.50 a week, or $128 a year. And with that, it will generate for the city $40 to $50 million that will go towards affordable housing. And it will go this will create an ongoing investment. This is not just a one-time investment, but it's ongoing investment for housing. It will allocate funds where the need is greatest. And so most of the money will go to households who are making $30,000 a year or less. So it is designed to go where the need is greatest. It supports pathways to home ownership. So this is not just the creation of new housing, but it also makes it possible for people who are in their homes to be able to stay in their homes. And it provides emergency support services. And this is just an overview of that. 65% of the money goes for houses that are $30,000 a year or less. Up to 30% is used to create pathways for home ownership and help alleviate homelessness. And then 5% of the money would be to administrative costs. So to make sure that it is managed well. It is a very efficient solution for a huge problem that is happening in the city. The Cincinnati has, over the last year, the highest rate increase of rental rates. And over the last 3 years, we've had the fourth highest increase in the nation. Highest increase in the nation last year, fourth highest increase in the nation over the last 3 years. We are having an affordable housing crisis. You can see that in 2020, median rent was $760 a month. Now median rent is $1,815 a month. And I can guarantee that very few people's salaries have increased at that rate to keep it equal with the rate in rental costs. And what that means is that 1 in 3 Cincinnatians can't afford their current housing. People are paying more than they are financially able to pay in rent, and having to make decisions about where they cut in order to be able to stay in their homes. And that's not sustainable. And so in addition to the current crisis of people who are homeless, many of you, I'm sure, saw the information that Fox 19 reported on Cincinnati public schools, that homelessness is a huge concern in our public school system. So in addition to the people who are currently homeless and the crisis that is causing in our city and our public school system, we are also looking at creating more homeless people because they can't afford their housing costs. And so issue 24 will help to address the current issue and ward off a looming crisis. And so that for these reasons, I want to invite people to consider voting yes on issue 24.
Thank you, Nelson. So from that, we know that the housing issues are very predominant in Cincinnati, and that voters agree that this is a huge issue within the city of Cincinnati and beyond. Previously, there was initiative issue 3 that failed to try to address the housing issue. What do you think that says about Cincinnati voters, and how is this ballot initiative different than the previous one?
Yeah, that's a great question. Issue 3 had many serious points of debate in it. What everybody agreed even in 2020, was that affordable housing was a serious issue that needed to be addressed. And so in 2021, with issue 3, the everyone who ran for election that year addressed the need to take seriously the affordable housing crisis, um, even if they had debates about whether or not issue 3 was the right solution. And so after that, the coalition of people who worked hard to create and fight for issue 3 sat down with all of the people who said this is a serious issue, but we can't support this solution, and asked what were the reasons why they could not support it, what needed to be fixed. And so they said it didn't have a designated funding source. And so it raised questions about where the money was going to come from and how the city would have to rework its budget. And so we fixed that problem by using this restoration of the earnings tax. So the city budget won't be impacted. This won't cause anybody to lose their jobs. This won't cause any cut in services, in city services. And so this allows the city to continue to operate at its current budget levels and provide additional money on top of that to be able to address the affordable housing crisis. The other thing that has changed, in addition to this solution being a better solution, the other thing, real quick, I want to say about the solution is people said this issue 3 didn't allow the city to do its job, and it really tried to pull an end around the city. And so we took that seriously. And in issue 24, it allows the city to do its job of managing and directing who manages the money, but it puts proper restrictions on how the money can be used in order to prevent it from people from either not understanding what needs to happen or for other more nefarious reasons trying to redirect or make an end around the intention of issue 24. So there are safeguards in place that direct where the money has to go. There's an accountability board that includes people who have experienced homelessness, people who have worked to fight for people who are doing affordable housing. And then there are 2 community meetings that are open to everybody to look at what has happened so that the city has the ability to see twice a year how the money is being used. So there are checks and balances that are put in place. And this allows for both a restoration of the trust in government. It allows the government to earn our trust once again in the city of Cincinnati, and has clear measures of accountability and oversight from the community. And so the last thing I'll say about what has changed is, as you saw on the graphics, what was an affordable housing crisis in 2020 and 2021 has only escalated in Cincinnati. And so in 2020 and 2021, there were a lot of people who said, yes, we need to address this for our friends and neighbors. There are people that we know or people that we acknowledge are suffering because of this. What's happening now is almost everybody is saying we need to fix this because of what's happening to me and my family. The rent in my neighborhood is going up, and I'm worried I won't be able to find a place to live. My family member, my mother, my father is suffering from this. We brought people to City Hall, and we had 67 people who signed up to testify at City Hall. Everybody from college students to retired people, working people, everywhere in between. People who said the affordable housing crisis is impacting me and my family. And we had people who heard about it on the news and took off of work, took their lunch break, dropped their kids off at practice and drove down to City Hall to sign up and add their names to testify to it as well. This is how important this is. And so the level of crisis is escalated. And so if this was a serious issue in 2021, it is, in my case, in my view, it is morally reprehensible for us to close our eyes and try to turn a blind eye to it right now in 2023.
Thank you, Nelson. I think it's super important to your point to point out what the differences are. The first issue 3, we knew that it was a problem. Voters said that wasn't the solution. And so, that is part of creating solution and building community, is figuring out what went wrong, what voters didn't like, and figuring out those solutions moving forward. So to all our voters, know the difference. This is something that's important to you all, and make sure that you do your due diligence to support, and make sure that housing is a priority in the city of Cincinnati. And so moving on to that, priorities in Cincinnati. A big part of housing is the infrastructure, right? Cincinnati owns a lot of property. Could those properties that Cincinnati be used to create affordable housing through the current housing trust fund? What does it look like for Black developers? That has been an issue as well. That the city has said that no big developers feel that affordable housing is profitable. So how do we create those solutions to ensure that we have developers that want to develop that type of housing and that is profitable? And so we see this could be a potential solution to increase the number of Black developers that are developing these houses and develop the type of housing that is needed for the city of Cincinnati. And so our next ballot initiative that we'll discuss talks a lot about infrastructure, and that's the sale of Cincinnati's railroad. And so to give our audience a brief overview of the Cincinnati Railroad, Cincinnati is the only city in the country that still owns its freight railroad. It is a huge asset, and it's one of Cincinnati's biggest assets that they still own. They have proposed that we sell our railroad to Norfolk Southern, who owns many of the tracks throughout the United States, for $1.6 billion. We currently lease our railroad to Norfolk Southern, and the city of Cincinnati has been leasing their railroad to Norfolk Southern since, I think, the late 1800s. And so this is not a new relationship. This is one that has been ongoing. The issue with the lease is that it's capped. The amount of the lease is capped by inflation and federal regulation. So currently we receive between $24 and $25 million a year for the lease agreement with the railroad. That goes into our budget, and then the city council decides how that money is to be spent. The proposed railroad sale would take $1.6 billion and put it in a trust fund in which will be invested. The idea is that instead of the $25 million that we're getting for the lease, if we sell our railroad for $1.6 billion, we could put this in a trust that can be invested, that could potentially accrue more money than that $25 million that we're getting. The caveat is the money that is made from the investment fund, the sale of the railroad, can only be used for infrastructure, specifically existing infrastructure improvements, which means bridges, buildings, parks, green space, improvements in recreation facilities, improvements for parking purposes, and other public facilities that are owned by the municipal corporation with a useful life of 5 years or more. Existing infrastructure improvements only. So, for example, if Cincinnati would like to add a district and build a new police station, they will not be able to do that. What they can do, if it is an existing building, is do an improvement to that building. And so the money is restricted, but given all of the infrastructure improvements that is going on at the federal level, the city feels like this will give them an additional pot to meet some of those federal matches that will help improve infrastructure throughout the city. Many people are on both sides of this issue. Some people feel that Cincinnati should not be selling its biggest physical asset, while others feel like this is an opportunity for us to invest in Cincinnati's infrastructure future. And so we will hear from Magda from Derail the Sale. So I will kick it to you first to introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, and thanks again for letting Derail the Sale have an ability or a chance to speak here on this forum. My name is Magda Orlander. I've been a resident of Cincinnati for about 7 years now, and I am part of a coalition called Derail the Sale to oppose or vote no on issue 22, vote no on selling the railroad off. And we've been over the past few months since we learned about the sale and with the calamity, with the disaster in East Palestine, pulling together a nonpartisan community coalition. It's all grassroots of volunteers who are working to get the word out and get education out about the sale and why it's a bad deal for Cincinnati. I don't know if you wanted me to go into more detail or if we're just in introductions, but I can leave it at that.
We'll do introductions and I will go to Ashley Harp.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, Celeste. I think you did a really good job explaining, the deal. We think that this is a really good deal. I am the engagement director and spokesperson for the issue 22, Building Cincinnati's Future. And I'm excited to have this conversation. Like you said, this is an opportunity for Cincinnati. We have a backlog of infrastructure that we have not been able to look at or deal with because the current budget doesn't allow. So the opportunity here is to gain, by investing this, to gain more capital into the budget that will allow us to pay attention to the things that we haven't been able to pay attention to for a long time. We see this as the best deal that we have gotten in terms of Norfolk Southern trying to buy this railway. So thanks for having me.
So the first question that we'll go into, and I will give this to both Ashley and Magda. And Magda, I'll go with you first. What are the potential economic benefits or drawbacks associated with the railroad sale?
Look, Gail, let's just be clear. I mean, selling the railroad is a conversation that has been going on like ever since this piece of infrastructure was built. And it was built over around 6 generations ago as an investment into the future of the city, its community, and the people all the way down from here to Chattanooga, Tennessee. I mean, we're talking about 337 miles of track that cross multiple states. Now, $1.6 billion sounds like a lot of money, but it is not a windfall. I mean, like you were saying, it's put into a trust, and the city is expecting revenues from like $50 to $70 million a year. That's what the city was asking for when we were renegotiating the lease. And that is absolutely not too much to ask for in terms of a lease revenue, right? We own this property. It is a vital piece of infrastructure for Norfolk Southern or for any railroad in terms of connecting the south, the north and the south. And we could be getting the same kind of secure revenue year to year in a lease that we're looking at getting from an investment into, a brokered account on Wall Street that may or may not yield that kind of money. It is very clear, like rent is a stable source of revenue. Gambling on the market is not. Also, like investment, that means a lot of hidden fees in terms of like administering the fund, what gets reinvested into the principal. A lot of those terms and conditions, the management of that fund are not even clear yet. But the city and Norfolk Southern are acting like it's a done deal. Like this is something that they just need the public to rubber stamp on it. At the end of the day, there is no reason even to be pushing it so soon, right? To be pushing it before there has been sufficient public engagement and education, and engagement with the voters around what would be other potential considerations for the use of this railroad, our relationship with Norfolk Southern. It is time for us to really look at this and say, hey, why are we not renegotiating a lease? Why are we counting on selling off what has been for 6 generations, year over year? like an asset that has yielded an unmatched return on its investment, that all of a sudden we're just trying to get rid of. The city could really put more effort into making the deal more beneficial for our residents. The city has the ability to renegotiate the lease with Norfolk Southern, and we think citizens should really consider strongly to vote no on issue 22, because it is just a bad financial deal for the city, and we would lose a valuable asset, which again offers continued revenue, has done that for generations. And on top of that, we would lose any community oversight and control and potential for further like opportunities, right, that ownership of this rail could give. There has been a real gap in transparency or clarity around any of the details in this sale. And we just need to have more clarity on what the impacts would be for the people of Cincinnati. The city could amend the current contract in terms to hold multiple leases. I mean, yes, it is the last municipally owned railroad in the country that covers like multiple states, the last interstate railroad, but other public entities own railroads. There are states that own tracks, and there are other municipalities that own smaller tracks, none of them interstate. There's a railroad that's municipally owned, 10 miles of track out in California, that got $97 million in rent in 2022. And we are sitting on 337 miles of vital infrastructure to which there is no alternative. And we can't negotiate a better lease on this. I mean, there's just a lot of questions out here.
Thank you, Magda. And Ashley, I'll ask you the same questions. What are the drawbacks and some of the economic benefits to selling the railroad?
I think that it's important to discuss that the Cincinnati Southern Railway has done its job. It was created to be an investment, and it has done that, and it's gotten us to this point. And the CSR board has done its due diligence. They have been advised by multiple experts on what this deal should look like, and this is the best deal. They have done evaluations, all of this, which can be found on the Cincinnati Southern Railway's website. So when we're talking about economic impact, we're talking about the ability for this money to grow, and not just grow. We will be able to still get that 25 million that we're already getting. And so when we are discussing the economic benefits, we're talking about existing infrastructure that needs paying attention to, that we have not been able to pay attention to. So the CSR board has done its due diligence in terms of finding the best solution for this asset that we have. And this is what we came up with. So I agree that this was created to be an investment. And I do believe that this is the best deal when you look at the evaluations, you look at the advice that experts have given. This is the best opportunity for us to see growth and allow Cincinnati to invest in Cincinnati. So when we talk about transparency and everything, I encourage people to go to the website, the CSR website. I also encourage people to go to buildingcincinnati'sfuture.com, where you can see a lot of the backlog that the city has put out there that needs attention to. And I think that if people understand that this money is an opportunity, that they'll understand that this is a great deal for Cincinnati and that they should be voting yes on 22. So taking that 1.6 billion and being able to invest it in yield and return, these numbers are very conservative, very conservative. So we're confident that the information that is out there supports our efforts in saying that this is a great opportunity. This is a great opportunity for Cincinnati to invest in the things that will yield a lot of people being able to come to Cincinnati and want to be a part of this city. It'll yield a lot of return. And so, like I said, this is very conservative returns when we're talking about numbers. And CSR board, I believe, has done their due diligence in getting the advice that they need to make the best decision for the city and its residents.
Thank you. And so we talked a lot about the CRS board. And so I want to explain to our audience who that is. So our CSR board is the advisory board appointed by the mayor that makes decisions around our railroad. Currently, there are 5 people that sit on that board. Paul Muting, Paul Sylvester, Charlie Lucan, Mark Mallory, and Amy Murray. Those are the board members. I think some of the concern has always been about, if the railroad is sold, if this is such a great deal and we'll have, extra revenue for infrastructure, how is that infrastructure money going to be equitable distributed? And so I want to talk about ensuring that, if these things pass, how will the equity look? And so I really want to start with Nelson for him to ask that question as well when it comes to the housing issue. How does equity look with passing that housing issue, and how do we ensure that we don't have gentrification?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to share a more detailed graphic about where the money would go. So this kind of crazy looking slide details in really great detail where the money would go. So up to 30% of the money can go to temporary services for helping people with temporary needs, to home ownership affordable at 80% of the AMI or lower, roughly around $80,000 a year. Families, households that are making $80,000 a year or less, and then homes affordable to 31 to 50%, so roughly between $30,000 and $50,000 a year. And you can see what that looks like for a family of 4, for a family of 3, for a single adult. And then 65% of the funds must go here to homes affordable at 30% AMI or lower. And again, you can see what that looks like for a family of 4, family of 3, and a single adult. And so the issue, as it is stipulated, a vote yes would amend the charter and require that the money goes into Fund 439, which is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It is the only affordable housing trust fund that the city of Cincinnati has. And it will go there for these purposes. And this is all written by law. And so this money cannot be used for other purposes. Anybody who applies for this money, I think Celeste, you mentioned it, that there are a lot of neighborhoods who want affordable housing in their neighborhoods, and they are talking to developers about it, and the developers say there's no money for it. And that is true to a large extent, that people who all they do is build affordable housing, it takes them between 7 to 10 years to move a project from the completion of the design to being able to start breaking ground on the project, because it takes them that long to find funding for it. And so this will create a pot of money where the funding for those projects is available. And so neighborhoods who will say to developers, we don't want only high income housing in our neighborhoods. We want housing that's available for low income individuals, low income families. There's a pot of money that's available so that neighborhoods can be able to stand up to developers and require them to put this in order to be able to develop in their neighborhoods. So it is baked in the issue that this will happen. It creates the necessary safeguards to make sure that the money goes where it needs to go. Which is why this has been work that's been happening for several years, almost a decade now, where these ideas have been tossed around. Experts have analyzed it. We've been in conversation with people from University of Cincinnati and Xavier University to help pinpoint the nature of the need. What are possible solutions? We've had conversations with elected officials, with developers, with union leaders about what would need to happen in order for a solution to be done well that doesn't impact the city. We've looked at sister cities like Pittsburgh and Minneapolis who have done similar things and taken the best methods from what we've seen in those cities. So this has been a very well thought out approach that to a huge problem that we have.
Thank you, Nelson. And I'll go to you, Magda. What are your concerns around equity around this deal? And if, they say yes to the railroad, what does equity look like in the infrastructure? And what does transparency look like in equity as well around this sale?
Yeah, no, before I say anything, I just want to shout out our brother, Pastor Nelson, and the Cincinnati Action for Housing Now, and all of the work around issue 24. I mean, all of these issues go hand in hand, right? So I just really appreciate you being here and also being able to have this platform and get the word out, and all of the work of that campaign to support working people in Cincinnati. I think as far as the sale of the railroad goes, right, there are more questions than answers. There is no plan. There are the regulations or how the fund would be administered. That has not been written. I mean, there's some mention, okay, it has to be limited to existing infrastructure, but who's to say that money is going to go to fix the potholes in Bond Hill rather than just prop up and do remodel the old convention center or any of the existing stadiums? I mean, the city has a history of broken promises. Where are the guarantees that this money is going to go to fund not only jobs, but good jobs that pay a living wage, good union jobs that provide security and benefits, and are not going to go into private subcontracts where people just get taken advantage of because there's no oversight and transparency, because that's the reality that we're living in. I mean, I think we can all agree that Cincinnati needs to invest more in its infrastructure, and it needs to do so equitably, right? Especially in terms of thinking about, well, who are not just the developers and the business owners on those jobs, are we doing justice to minority and women-owned contractors, but also who are the workers that are working for those companies, and are they really benefiting? Are these Cincinnati people really benefiting? Are workers of color, our low-wage workers, are immigrant and women workers really benefiting from these contracts? I have seen nothing. And there have been no guarantees and no representation, only misinformation about, well, we would be losing out on an opportunity here if we don't do this. And again, voting no does not mean saying no to investment. It means saying we go back and negotiate a better deal, right? Just like you would with any collective bargaining agreement. The city keeps saying it's our only option for funding, there's all this due diligence. Well, where has it been? I mean, the city residents the public was not made aware of any of these negotiations and these assessments, and there are still a lot of those documents that are hidden from public view. For over a year and a half, the public knew of the sale being the best deal that we could broker was in November of 22, and it was basically presented as, okay, this is a done deal. All we need is the voters to rubber stamp it. I think we all really deserve an answer to what else the city has done to close our funding gaps. They talk about the deficit, but the fact is our city has one of the highest bond ratings Moody's could give out to any municipality. And just to translate that in lay terms, that means our credit line is excellent. In addition to our capacity to be able to leverage existing assets and funds to get those kinds of lines of credit, the Biden administration passed the Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I mean, for rail alone, there's $100 billion earmarked for investment into railroads, not even to mention this historic investment into infrastructure and especially into greening our economy, right? Green infrastructure. There are jobs. There's a lot of opportunity out here. And the city, all we're hearing from them is if we don't sell this railroad, all hell will break loose. But where's the receipts, right? And I think this is all happening very quickly. I mean, the public didn't even know until last November that the sale of the railroad was on the ballot. For a year and a half, 2 years, negotiations were happening in secret, when at the end of the day, it's not the board, it's not the mayor, it's not city council, it's the voters of the city of Cincinnati who collectively own this asset that, again, runs 337 miles all the way from here down to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and are tasked with making a once, not in a generation, a once in 6 generations kind of decision about what to do with this asset. And we're not even informed that there were negotiations about a sale until the very last minute. It really speaks to, like, we really need more public engagement around this. This is an asset that, again, has benefited us for 6 generations and could benefit the city and its community and the people from here to Chattanooga for 6 more generations to come. And we're supposed to make a decision on information where there's more public engagement about bike lanes and parking lots and zoning reform than there has been about the sale of this railroad. We really need more time and more information to be able to make a decision about that as a community, and including about, well, where does the funding then go, and where is the equity and how it gets reinvested, and which part of the infrastructure is getting priority. All of those things are unanswered questions, and voting no this November on issue 22 means giving the community a real shot at being part of those conversations and of being a real part of creating the plan, not just rubber stamping something that people we don't even know told us was the right thing without showing us the receipts,
Thank you. And so actually, I want to give you a chance to chime in as well to talk about, what is the plan for equitable distribution of this potential sale? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think it's important to also, talk about those good things like Pastor Nelson talked about when we talk about walls that are in place to ensure its success. We talk about the Ferguson Act and that how that had to change in order for things to be for this money to only go to existing infrastructure. And so the city released a deferred maintenance list. And on that deferred maintenance list were just the top 10 projects that the city has, in plans to focus on. And one of those is a recreation center at South Fairmount. This is a community that is 92% African American, or railings, or aquatic centers, or streets. So there has been information out here about what needs to be done. And so I think it's more so about understanding that this money has to go to infrastructure. It is something that was done at the state level in order for us to get to this point. So we're talking about equitable spending. Yes, there is plans. You can go to Building Cincinnati right now and look at the top 10. The city released it months ago. And I think that it speaks to equity and how they're looking at certain projects in certain neighborhoods. So we have these walls around and put in place so that we don't have to rely on, bad decision making. This is something that has walls around it and can only be utilized on existing infrastructure. So I think that is a key to this deal. It's important that we understand that. And the fact that we have a log that goes that far is something that we should pay attention to. So again, yes on 22, but it has a lot of things that are in place to prevent what everybody is afraid of. And so even when we talk about there being a freeze of if the fund ever gets to 75%, things like that were implemented and saw fit at the state level to make sure and ensure that Cincinnati uses this investment to benefit its citizens. So that log, and I can send that to you if you like, Celeste, but you can actually find that on the website, on the city's website as well. And it talks about places like Fairmount and Lower Price Hill and areas like that have been wanting and needing infrastructure development. And with this deal and this investment, we will be able to pay attention to those things.
Thank you. We're going to move to some questions from our live audience. And so one of the things that came up is the representation on the CRS board. So we know that this is a 5-person board appointed by the mayor. And many people have questions on how will the funds be invested? What type of things will they invest in? Will it be private prisons or will it be into the green? The green community and green investments, as Cincinnati has been a leader in, the Green Cincinnati plan. Is the investment going to be in line with what the voters of Cincinnati actually want to invest in as they see moving Cincinnati forward? And so I think one of the questions that came from the audience is that there's only one BIPOC person on the CRS board. And so, what will be the transparency for the community to know what the board is investing in? And are there opportunities to put some community representation on that board that's going to be making decisions about the funds? And I want to also clarify that these type of funds the city has. We have these funds that we invest. We have one that's called the Enterprise Fund that invests. We don't have a fund of this size. And that fund is actually determined, this investment in-house by the city, and the city staff administers that fund. And so I want to kind of leave it open to address those concerns for the question. The specific question was, how do we get more diverse representation on the board? And I'll start with you, Magda.
So when it comes to who is on the board of the current administration, right? Those are political appointments that happen by the mayor's office. The mayor's elected and is supposed to represent the interest of all of the city, and that happens through the election process. There are 5 seats, and they're appointed, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're appointed for 5 years. And so currently the board of trustees, they were all appointed by the previous mayor's administration. And when they roll out, whoever is the current mayor is going to be in charge of appointing that board. And you're right. I mean, I think there are ways in which we need to be exploring and talking about how democratic that kind of institution really is, and what is the accountability to the public. I mean, before the derailment, I mean, this became news in November. So that's when a lot of people first learned that the city even owns a railroad and has this kind of asset and has this kind of control and weigh in on what is to be done with this asset. But it wasn't until the disaster, and I don't call it an accident, because that disaster could have been prevented. Accidents are like things that just happen, but that disaster could have been prevented. So it took a train derailment for people to really start paying attention to this issue. And that should not need to be the case. Like, the community should have been aware. We could have spent the past 2 years with public engagement around, well, what's to be done with the railroad, because we own this thing and the lease is going to be up. But no, all of these negotiations happen behind closed doors by people who were appointed by the previous mayor's office. The process for the new board of trustees, it would basically, there's really no clarity around what the actual regulations are going to be around how the money is going to be spent, aside from, oh, it has to be for existing infrastructure. Again, that can mean South Fairmount. That can also mean the convention center. And who gets to make that decision? Again, we all land back with our communities, elected representatives at the city level. And as far as I understand, even though this again has not been made clear, that board of trustees right now, those 5 people appointed by the mayor, are going to transition into being the trustees of the fund. And they're going to hire an asset manager who's going to take a certain percentage. About, like, from what I hear, the going rates, like based on the size of the fund, $8 to $10 million a year, at least, based on those conservative estimates of the returns. And it's going to be out of our hands.
I was gonna say, Ashley.
The CSR board is a nonpartisan board, and it's tasked with ensuring that we get a great value for this asset. And now, as projects get invested, that's something that city council will, be able to delegate and use. So the process is that the city department, the city will be a part of how this money will be spent. So the CSR board is a nonpartisan group. And like you said, they have a 5-year term. And I think that there will be opportunity. These meetings are public and they have been going on, and their minutes are online. And so everything that they discuss is on there, on the minutes as well. And so I think that it's important to pay attention to. It's important to ask these questions and have these conversations. I believe that this will be a great way for us to help and benefit the citizens of Cincinnati. So again, the CSR board is going to oversee these things, but the city council, your city council members, have the ability to use these funds equitably.
Thank you. And so as we're getting close to time, I do, this is Black Landscapes Matter, ran by the Black environmental leaders. So we cannot leave without exploring the environmental implications. And so I want to talk about, the derailment and the concerns of people and their safety with the freight rail and what's being carried on them. So Magda, from your perspective, what are the environmental implications to the sale of this railroad?
Listen, and I'm going to try to keep it brief, so you feel free to cut me off because there's a lot to say. When Norfolk Southern's train derailed, 150 train cars were part of that train in East Palestine earlier this year, with at least 20 of them carrying toxic forever chemicals. They controlled every aspect of the investigation. Why? Because their lines were private. They hired their own security and they had full control over the response, limiting to some extent state and local oversight and control based on the narrative, because it's private property. I mean, there were reports of people trying to test soil who were run off that property because, hey, this is private property. What are you doing here? We would lose that kind of control or oversight. Residents waited and waited and waited for the answers about what Norfolk Southern was doing and what kind of products they were carrying that was poisoning the air and the soil and the water. We may still not know the truth. The thing is, with a publicly owned asset, there is as much as like there might be some limitations to regulation, there is oversight, there's transparency that the city can assert that no government can assert to the same extent when it's like a privately owned asset. Additionally, I mean, rail is the future. Again, the Biden administration is like has put his past historical investments into not just infrastructure and not just green infrastructure, but specifically into railroad. We already know that freight rail is a much greener way of transporting goods than trucks and airplanes are. And in some cases, like you can't ship some of these things over an airplane, right? Our mayor has claimed that, like, the city has already admitted this. They have this whole Green Cincinnati plan. They want to commit to environmental improvements. And we also know that we cannot afford to waste time. There's all of this stuff about greening freight rail that, frankly, Norfolk Southern as a company is part of this like cartel, this monopoly of like now 7, soon to be 6 monopolies in the railroad have for decades like chosen not to invest in upgrading the infrastructure in favor of short-term shareholder profits, right? We own this railroad. Not only does that mean that there are certain controls that we can leverage over oversight and transparency, over regulatory, to some extent, into like regulatory mechanisms by negotiating through the lease in terms of greening that infrastructure, but also we have the rights to assert passenger rail rights as an owner of that railroad. There are all of these opportunities. I just learned yesterday that in Lexington, which is one of the cities that our railroad connects to, there is strong interest and support from the city into exploring putting a passenger rail line onto the railroad that right now is owned by Cincinnati Southern Railway, and that we are right now considering selling off. It is incredibly difficult and incredibly hard to negotiate and assert those kinds of rights over railroads that are owned by multiple disparate private entities. Because like right now, the lease is even with like a subsidiary of Norfolk Southern. As long as we maintain the tracks, if we don't do anything in terms of the environmental stuff, there is still like a secure return on investment that we can reinvest into green infrastructure in our city. But as long as we hold on to that asset, we have the open door to explore green infrastructure and opportunities that would create jobs and that would reduce emissions and create futures like for the city of Cincinnati, all the way down for the communities down in Chattanooga.
Thank you. And Nelson, I want to ask you the same question, and I'll come back to you, Ashley.
Okay.
What are the environmental implications for housing? How could this improve the environmental conditions of housing?
Yeah, so I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of this, is that affordable housing is it is a foundational good that produces more good. When people have places to live, safe and stable places to live, and they're able to afford their places to live, they're able to make more informed decisions. And so our ability, people's ability to be able to imagine a city with reduced car traffic, which will help the environment, is only possible when people have choice about where to live. And they're able to choose to live in places that have easy access to public transportation or that are close to where they work. Creating this allows people to be able to make holistic choices that inform, that they are then able to shape the rest of the way in which they live in ways that can help produce better environments. But I was mentored by a Baptist preacher who was also a blues musician, and he would always say, if you give people chitlin choices, they're gonna make funky decisions. And so if we want people to be able to make better decisions about the ways in which they live, that will help to produce a healthier future for our environment, we have to give choices that are affordable, that allow them to be able to live with dignity now. And from that position, they're better able to make choices about investments in our future.
Thank you. And then Ashley, I'll throw it to you about to that question, and then we'll close out with everybody in a 30-second statement.
Okay, so the reality is that Norfolk Southern has been running this rail line since the 1800s. And so oversight of the railroads is a federal matter. And so the city already does not oversee or maintain the railroad. It's maintained by Norfolk Southern. So when we talk about environmental things, this money being able to be used for infrastructure will allow us to be ready to upgrade environmental hazardous equipment. Will be able to allow us to see climate change and be able to have a plan for that. So, and I did want to mention that convention centers and stadiums aren't on the existing infrastructure. So yeah, I wanted to add that on there too. So that's the reality of this deal. We can spend time talking about Norfolk Southern, but I think that it is important to realize that they have been a part of this story since its creation. And this deal will allow us the opportunity to move past that and move to a better future. So we are asking everyone to vote yes on 22 because this is a great opportunity to build that future. Yeah.
I want to thank you. And we'll go to our closing statements, and we'll start with Pastor Nelson.
Thank you so much, Celeste. Thank you to Black Landscapes Matter. It's always good to be with you all in this conversation, even though in a little bit of a different role than what I've been accustomed to. I just want to invite you to go to cincyhousingforall.com so that you can see the information that's available. We wanted to make this as transparent as possible so that the voters could see all of the work and intention that goes into it. And so you can see under the amendment, not only the talking points for the amendment, but we have the amendment in its entirety so that you can read through it, dissect it, ask questions, and then be able to look and understand why we are asking you to vote yes on issue 24. So please, for more information, go to cincyhousingforall.com. And when you are ready to say yes, you can pledge your vote and join us for our action days as we spread the good news about issue 24 to our communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Magda, 30 seconds.
Norfolk Southern may have been leasing this thing since its beginning, but a carpenter knows better than to sell her tools, right? I mean, again, for generations, it's been a revenue generator. For generations, it can still be. And we, not only by saying no, do we keep that revenue generation, but as long as we own that asset, we keep an ability as a community, as the public, to make decisions about that future. Rail is the future. Why would we give that up, especially when we can make the same kind of money from a lease that they're promising us in an unsecure Wall Street investment. I think more than anything, the important thing is to get the word out and get voters educated about what has happened and all the lack of information really that's out there. So our call to action is vote no on issue 22, but also we really want to invite, we're a community coalition. There are a couple of PACs that have emerged, but Derail the Sale, we are not funded. We're all volunteer. We are not taking money. We're not set up for that. We care about the community. We are from the community. We have been working in coalition with organizations, including River Valley Organizing, who were out there actively supporting and working with and being represented by members of the East Palestine community. We have been working closely with Railroad Workers United, the cross union rank and file union member organization that actively bargains contracts as employees of these railroads, right? If you are interested in finding out more information, even if you're skeptical, contact us at derailthesalecincy@gmail.com. I will make sure Celeste has like a graphic or the information she can put up for y'all to be able to contact us. If you have a community forum, or if you are a member of community council, or if you live in a neighborhood in Cincinnati, we are trying to like get the word out. We don't have the money to like get mailers out or like knock on a bunch of doors, but what we can do as neighbors is talk to neighbors. So if you're interested at all, contact derailthesalecincy@gmail.com. Number two, let's talk to the community council about this in your neighborhood. If you are interested, again, reach out. And number three, if you are part of an organization, if you're seeing this, you want more information, you're interested in how to get involved, again, contact us. We have a couple of different social media sites, and I'll make sure that that's posted. Get in touch, we'll get you more information, but just more than anything, get involved. It is so important that we preserve this asset and we preserve our role as a community to be able to negotiate around that asset for the future. Thanks.
Thank you. And Ashley.
Thank you again, Celeste, for having this forum. And thank you for all panelists for being here. And to the residents of Cincinnati, I look forward with engaging you and answering your questions. This is an important deal and a great deal for the city of Cincinnati. And so if you want to get any more information, please go to buildingcincinnati.com. buildingcincinnati'sfuture.com or info@buildingcincinnati'sfuture.com. Also, you can go to the Cincinnati Southern Railway.com, as well as pay attention to the website so that you can see the next steps in terms of forums and engagements that we will be having with the community to talk about this and get the right information, the facts out there so that people can make an informed decision that will help benefit their future. So thank you for having me. And yes on 22.
Thank you all. Well, hopefully this was very informative for our voters, for you all to make informed decisions when it comes to initiatives this November. And thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in October for more Black Landscapes Matter. Thank you guys.